This is Aaron McLaughlin with the Happy Lab, and I'm going to be walking us through how to do a mediation analysis in research. First, before we start, let's just talk about what it is and why you would want to do a mediation. Well, mediation analysis is looking at more than a correlation or regression would look at. Correlation looks at the strength of a relationship or whether one exists between two variables. Regression starts to imply causation by saying the change in one variable predicts the change in another. But mediation adds to this by saying or asking, how does that variable exert its effect on another variable? And so mediation looks at the total effect of one variable x on another variable y through both the direct relationship of x and y as well as the mediated or indirect relationship through a third variable, m. So why would we use mediation research? It's to test a hypothesis that would help establish causality with the research question and to tell us what mechanism is involved in this causation. And we're looking to explain how one variable affects another variable and demonstrating that there is a mediating variable at work explaining a significant portion of that relationship. So why is this important to you? Well, it might be important in understanding in the counseling relationship with your client how one variable might be mediating the relationship between your processes you're using in counseling and the hoped for outcomes in the client's life. In research, it's also important because it's widely used, it's popular, and a simple mediation model will help you form more complex, advanced analyses that can provide a much deeper and broader understanding of what's happening when one variable affects another. And so, what do you need to run a mediation analysis? First, let's get our data set, get acquainted with our data set. So you need a few variables. So here we have a data set of seminary students who took a lot of surveys on humility, religious commitment, and religious and spiritual measures, and fundamentalism. And so we're going to look at three variables. We're going to look at we're going to look at religious commitment. We are going to look at fundamentalism, and we are going to look at the moral foundation of purity. And our research hypothesis will be, does the moral foundation of purity mediate the relationship or explain part of the relationship between religious commitment and fundamentalism? So you need SPSS, but before you can run this analysis on SPSS, you need to go to afhays.com and you need to download a program called Process. So you'd go to the download and you would download Process, and this is going to allow you to run mediation and moderation analyses on SPSS. You would also want to find the template that tells you different models to use. In this case, model 4 is the template for mediation. So now that we know what we need for this, let's run the mediation. So you would go to your SPSS, click Analyze, click Regression, go to Process option, click, and then you're going to want these variables in X, Y, and M. M is your mediating variable, so we're going to have the moral foundation of purity as our mediating variable, partially explaining how the change in religious commitment, your independent variable, predicts the change in fundamentalism. And here intratextual fundamentalism was the instrument used, which will be our outcome variable. You want to use model 4 for your mediation. Go to options, make sure mean center for products is chosen, make sure you have your confidence intervals, And you can click effect size and total effect model and compare indirect effects to help explain what the mediation output will tell you. Click continue, and then you're ready to go. So click OK, and an output will be generated on SPSS. And while it's generating that, we'll go ahead and highlight that we accomplished this. So let's look at our output here and look at interpreting it. So if you remember, our variables are religious commitment, a mediating variable of purity, and an outcome variable of fundamentalism. And when you look at the outcome of purity, we're looking at, does religious commitment relate to purity? And here we see through the significance level right here that yes, there's a significant relationship between religious commitment and purity. And this number, your coefficient, is also your beta weight. And what this regression coefficient is saying is that if you change religious commitment, your score on religious commitment by 1, then the score of purity would go up by 0.4. Then we're looking at the outcome variable of fundamentalism here, and we see both purity and religious commitment. So we have our X and mediating variables here. They're both significant, and so if purity goes up 1, then the change in fundamentalism is 0.58, and if religious commitment goes up 1, then the change in fundamentalism is 0.91. And here you have a summation or a summary of the variance. So here the regression equation of involving both religious commitment and the mediating variable of purity to predict fundamentalism explains 58% of the variance in fundamentalism. Our total effect here is adding the effect of both religious commitment on fundamentalism, but also the indirect path of religious commitment through your mediating variable purity. And so here we can see the total effect of X on Y, as well as the direct effect and the indirect effects. And the total effect of X on Y is the addition of the direct effect plus the indirect effect. So that's your output of your mediation, and that's how you can interpret what your analysis is looking at. So in summary, our analysis was showing that there is a direct effect that religious commitment has on fundamentalism, but that also there was an indirect effect or a partial influence or explanation of the relationship of religious commitment on fundamentalism through purity.